How do Canada's environmental policies for the oil and gas sector compare with other countries? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on secondstreet.org. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Dennis Giesbrecht. He's an asset integrity inspector, which means he makes sure that all the equipment in the industry is working well and running right. Have I got that right, Dennis?
Yeah, it is pretty accurate, yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thanks for taking a few minutes to chat with me today. I was wondering if you could maybe start off by explaining a little bit about your background and involvement with the industry.
Well, I've been in the industry about 20 years, working for pretty much every major player in Canada and throughout the world. So I've seen Canadian standards grow and evolve over the last 20 years. And I've also seen how they are different from most jurisdictions all around the world.
And could you give us just a bit of an idea of some of the other countries that you've worked in?
I've worked all over the U.S. I've been to Africa. I've been to as far south as Chile, Australia, New Zealand, Equatorial Guinea, Germany, Spain, U.S. Pretty sure I'm forgetting a couple, but they all kind of blend together after a while.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you've got a full passport full of stamps there from different countries. How do our policies compare with other countries in terms of the environmental rules that the oil and gas industry has to follow? What have you seen at the ground level?
Oh, I've seen our environmental and safety standards are second to none. I've seen places in the world where a few hundred liters of diesel fuel gets spilled and nobody does a thing. Whereas in Canada, we have drip trays and we have cleanup policies and procedures down to like a 1 liter spill. So our cleanup is extensive. I've seen our safety standards for employees is second to none. I've been on projects where the locals have next to no safety equipment, and when I leave that project, I give everything I have away, short of my work boots. So hard hats, glasses, gloves, all that sort of stuff, because these poor guys are trying to do the job they're being asked to do, and the safety standard is not there.
And what would be some of the examples of like the projects that you're working on, the type of stuff that you're doing, the activities you're working on, and what you're seeing in other countries? You had mentioned one about with protesters and how they weren't even following some of the guidance.
Yeah,
making.
that was a fun one. That was up in the far north on the Arctic ice. There's a line going in, and we do it when it's frozen, and then once the line is built, we basically chisel up the ice and drop it to the ocean floor. It's not very busy there. But our vehicles, they all had, we call them diapers. It's drip trays underneath the trucks. We had porta potties there for washrooms, all that sort of thing. Nothing was left behind. Meanwhile, about 50 yards away, there's a protest group. They had diesel generators. They had no washroom facilities, strange enough, being out there for days at a time. They had no cleanup. They had no, we've seen this time and time again with protesters, whether it's the water savers or these protests. They leave this mess behind because they're trying to protest us, and we're 9 times out of 10 the ones that have to go and clean up after them. It is a little frustrating.
I bet that would be frustrating. And just, you mentioned drip trays. That was a concept I wasn't familiar with before we had a brief chat on the phone the other day. Could you tell us a little bit sort of how that works and what that is for those who aren't familiar with the term?
Sure. A drip tray is like a giant cookie sheet, and we put that underneath the vehicles, especially on the ice whenever we stop, to make sure that even if there's a small oil leak or coolant leak or anything like that, it will never make it to the environment. It'll caught by the trays first. And we use things like water, and when it's super cold, we use glycol for some of our equipment, and that's all reused, recycled, collected again. The basic mantra is leave nothing behind.
So you're having to use these drip trays. The protesters aren't, and other countries, they're not using drip trays. I got to ask you, is it frustrating at the grassroots level, yourself and your colleagues, like when you think about the big picture and how Canada's industry is being held back often in the name of protecting the environment, and yet in other countries, it's the last thing seems to be the last thing on the minds of those who are running those projects.
Oh yeah, outside of Canada, U.S. still got pretty good standards as well. But the frustration becomes from, we have to defend ourselves constantly, whether it's in Canada or projects we do elsewhere. And when we go to do a project elsewhere, we try and bring our standards with us. But the protest groups, they spread so much misinformation. They spread so much negative information. I mean, the Canadian oil and gas industry, we're the largest investor in renewable energies. People don't look at that. We're finding ways to pull things like lithium and titanium out of our tailings in the far north in Fort McMurray. Things will actually end up going into electric cars and electric vehicles are being produced from the oil and gas sector in Canada, and we get no publicity. The world's first carbon capture refinery is just going online. It's just outside of Edmonton. Nobody talks about that. We've got a carbon capture coal power plant in Saskatchewan. These are incredible technologies that once we perfect, the first one's always the hardest. Once we perfect these are things that we can distribute throughout the world. And these are the technologies that will end up making a far bigger impact than these small, nitpicky processes along the way.
Mm-hmm. And what's the feeling among yourself, your colleagues, other people in industry that you talk to when it comes to government policies are often, that's often the cause for why many of these projects aren't going ahead, why countries or companies are choosing other countries. What's the feeling at the grassroots level there when you talk to other people about when you see these policies being announced?
Well, the policies are, I mean, we can always do better. That's our goal, is always to do better. But when we handcuff the industry in ways that Canada, if the world produced, say, oil, for example, if we produce oil to the Canadian standard worldwide, greenhouse gas emissions would drop 23%. Nobody talks about that. Our LNG replacing coal-fired power plants in China and that area of the world will drop emissions substantially. Nobody talks about that, but they still try and handcuff these projects and protest these projects. They're actually, the more they protest, the more this unethical and unenvironmentally sound produced oil gets distributed. I mean, people are going to use the product. Let's get it from the cleanest, most environmentally sound jurisdictions in the world, and that's Canada.
And finally, I just want to ask you: you're living in Kamloops, BC. How often, how common is it for people to work in the interior of British Columbia there and commute to Alberta or work in the oil and gas sector outside of that community?
Much more common than people actually think. At one point in elementary school, there's about 20% of my children's classmates had one or two parents that flew in and out to a job, whether it was northern Alberta or northern BC. There's a lot of gas projects going on up there. And last time I checked, there is around $1 billion in income tax per year paid by Alberta workers to the province of British Columbia.
Oh, wow. And it's and now I've seen polls that indicate that most British Columbians are in support of things like the Trans Mountain Pipeline and that, but certainly on a policy level, there has been some obstruction from the provincial government there. Do you take any flack at all from your friends and colleagues in Alberta at all?
No, everyone, I mean, a lot of my friends live in BC as well, whether the coast, lower mainland, and they understand that the average Joe on the street is in favor of this the pipeline project, the Trans Mountain expansion, but it's become mired in foreign funded activists and government trying to stay in power.
All right. Well, listen, thanks, Dennis. Just before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to add?
I think we were talking earlier about the frustration felt at the ground level. And it's getting worse because so many workers, we take pride in our work. We are the guys that go out, there's hunting, fishing, we spend our time out in the environment. And being painted with this brush or being anti-environmental is, at first it's confusing because we spend more of our time out in the forest than a lot of the people down in the lower mainland, and the frustration level, it grows because of the misinformation. And when you try and correct somebody, they've already decided negatively, and they tune out and don't listen to the facts. They've only listened to the Facebook and the Instagram soundbite that they get. And the more homework people do and the more people learn about our industry in Canada, the prouder that they are, and the more balanced picture we can see.
Well, I totally understand your frustration. I've been following the industry and what's going on from outside for a while now, and I can see often that there is a lack of facts getting to certain people, and you unfortunately see a lot of misinformation. But I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us today about what you're seeing at the ground level. So thanks for your time today, Dennis.
Oh, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
And if anyone would like to learn more about our natural resource development research, you can do so at secondstreet.org.